Welcome back to the Jiu Jitsu Oracle. I'm Ross, that's Calum. There are about 1 million grappling matches on this weekend at the last count, so we are going to do our best to help navigate your way through them all. On this episode, we're going to look at the IBJJF Grand Prix that takes place on Thursday in California, and we're going to have a look at the first South American ADCC trials in Belo Horizonte. Then we'll be back on Friday or Saturday with a review of the IBJJF Grand Prix, and we'll start touching on some of the other grappling events that are happening this weekend, including ADCC and Grapple Fest and AIGA, and probably a lot more that I've forgotten.
Fight Pass, I think, as well.
UFC Fight Pass on Sunday, that's a big one. So, first things first, IBJJF Grand Prix, Thursday night US time. There's an 8-man bracket that is the centerpiece of the event. Calum, give us some insight into the bracket.
Yeah, so 8-man absolute tournament. We've had the bracket released, so we're seeing at least the first matches. Everyone in that division is really good. Definitely anyone on their day could have some upsets and wins, but I think the number 1 seed is definitely Kaynan Duarte. Obviously, coming off of a loss in one of his last high-profile matches against Nicholas Merigali, but it's still definitely one of the top guys in the world, period, in the higher weight classes and absolute. So he's got Haisam Rita first round. Usually when they structure these things, they'll tend to seed the guys and put the number 1 guy with the number 8 guy. I do think Haisam, definitely very dangerous, can definitely beat any of these guys on his day, but I do think he's one of the lower-rated guys, just schedule of work, the guys he's competed against versus Kaynan. So yeah, that's going to be the first match. Definitely see Kaynan getting through that, but like I say, if Kaynan leaves anything out, which we've seen in the past, sometimes he leaves his leg hanging out, or maybe an arm, I think Haisam's definitely the guy to capitalise on that. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, you've highlighted before, it's often the case of which Kaynan shows up. This is a match where I'd expect him to be focused because he knows the athletic threat that Haisam Rita could provide. And it's probably a good first match for Kaynan to get, because often the first match and the last match are the trickiest in any bracket. Yep. But I would favour Kaynan to win just by being a unit and having very good jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
So
good on top, good on bottom, good stand-up, quite comfortable to go wherever he really needs to go in the match.
And once he starts bearing weight on people, yeah, they usually start to suffer a bit, mid to late match. So I think that side of the bracket, favour Kaynan to come through. Who else do we have on that side, Calum?
Yeah, so the other first-round match is Dante Leon versus Elder Cruz, which is another interesting one. Really cool that we see Dante jumping about all these different weight classes. I think we've seen him compete at heavyweight, super heavyweight in some of the IBJJF comps, and then more recently we've seen him cut down to 70 to fight some of the smaller guys, which is great to see that he's not just getting complacent fighting the same guys in his division. So these guys are usually separated by one ADCC weight class, which is still quite a big amount, especially because I presume Elder's cutting down to 88 and Dante can obviously make 70 kilos, so there will be quite a big size difference. Usually we see Dante quite happy to wrestle in his matches. I think we'll probably see him pull guard in this one just because of the size differences, and as well, Elder's definitely one of the better wrestlers in his weight class, so it'd be cool to see Dante's guard against someone like Elder, see if he can get to his X-guard, wrestle up from there, and look to potentially score from there.
You mentioned X-guard. Do you think that would be a good guard to employ when you're giving away some weight?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely my go-to in the gym when I'm sparring some of the bigger guys. It's you're pretty much in a position where you're leg pressing, which is, I think, everyone's strongest movement. I think everyone can leg press a fairly decent amount. So yeah, when you get to X-guard and you've got your feet on the guy, you can leg press away. It becomes a lot easier to get their weight off of you and get up on top.
Out of those 4 gents, who are you favouring to come through?
I'd say probably Kaynan and Elder. Kaynan definitely the favourite in the whole division, I would say. And then Elder as well. He's got the weight advantage pretty solid overall game, wrestling, top game. So I think it'll be hard for Dante to score. Not saying he can't do it, he definitely can, but I definitely favour Elder in that match.
I fancy the same and kind of come through, and then we're into the other side of the bracket. Calum, who do we have there?
Yeah, so we've got Giancarlo Bodoni against Patrick Gaudio. So Patrick, again, kind of his last high-profile match was against Gordon. Obviously, not very competitive, but not very matches against Gordon are. So be interesting to see how that match goes. I think Giancarlo as well, similar to Kynan, like on his day, he can beat like pretty much anyone in the world. It just depends what Giancarlo shows up. So he could definitely win this whole division, I think, and definitely that side of the bracket. It just depends how the matchups go for him and who shows up. But I think Patrick's obviously got some size with him, very seasoned competitor, so he can definitely come out winning this match as well. Be interesting to see as well with the size difference. Giancarlo's obviously very good on the feet. It'll be interesting to see whether he elects to stand up with Patrick or he looks to pull guard and sweep from there.
Are you leaning to one side?
I'll go with Giancarlo on his good day, getting through that match.
I think Giancarlo probably has more submission threat ways to win. So if he's on form from the start, I think like the threat of the legs, of getting on the back, of maybe wrestling to get to the back, might be too much for Patrick. But it's a match because Giancarlo's not, like you said, necessarily always on it, flying out the traps in every single match. It's a match that has the chance of going either way. I just think Bodoni's probably got more in his arsenal. And then the second match on that side of the bracket, who have we got?
So we've got Roosevelt Souza versus Pedro Rocha. Getting two really big guys. It's an absolute division, so going to get some of these guys in the division, both really good. I think probably favour Roosevelt in that match. He's looked really good, really on form in ADCCs and IBJJFs the last couple of years. So I think I favour him to get through that match, and then that'll be a really interesting match against the other side of that bracket, or the other match in that side of the bracket, Giancarlo or Patrick Gaudio.
Do you have a preference out of the four for who might get to the final?
I think, again, it is quite hard with Giancarlo. It depends kind of who shows up and how he performs, but if you're going for like a safe bet, consistency, I might actually go for Roosevelt Souza just for the size, overall game, good positional game, quite dangerous as well with some submissions. So yeah, probably him.
Yeah. So Roosevelt against Kynan final, definitely high potential based on the size and skill of them both.
Yeah.
But particularly the size in an Absolute Grand Prix. I just probably would like to see Bodoni come through because I think it would be a better final.
Yeah.
Of him against Kynan. I think Roosevelt against Kynan might be pretty one-paced, a lot on the feet, no one really wanting to concede bottom position, whereas I think Bodoni would go after Kynan and try and submit him, particularly on the legs.
Yeah, and I think they had a match, I think their last match was potentially on a Who's Number One before Giancarlo's breakout at the last ADCC, and I don't think it was, I think it was quite competitive, so obviously Giancarlo's gotten a lot better since then, so if that Giancarlo that showed up at ADCC shows up at that event, it'll be a really good match to see. So yeah, I'm the same. Hopefully we do get to see that match in the final.
Okay, so I'd recommend that you follow Flow Grappling and follow the IBJJF on Instagram, and if you're not going to watch the whole event, at least you'll see a lot of the major clips, etc., that come out of it.
Yeah, some matches might get uploaded to YouTube fairly quickly after as well.
Yeah, and I think part of like the point of us doing this show is to give our thoughts on the matches, based on the fact that we watch a lot and we have a lot of opinions about jiu-jitsu, but it's also like to help people who maybe don't, like, the names don't jump out at them in every big event, to start like dipping their toes in the water of watching competitive grappling. So with, as well as the 8-man tourney, there's some super fights on the undercard, and I think all three of these are definitely worth watching and definitely have a good chance of seeing some exciting action in them. First one we'll touch on is Cade Rutolo against Nathan Chung. Cade's first match in the gi at black belt, I believe.
Yeah. So I think his last match in the gi was actually against his brother Ty, and they both competed at Gi Worlds. Was a match that Cade was actually dominating the most of it, and I think Ty caught him quite late in the match. And then Ty went on to compete black belt Gi Worlds, got silver, but then ended up getting gold because obviously Mika popped for steroid abuse. So yeah, it's Cade's actual first time competing at black belt, even though his brother has. So it'll be interesting to see. Quite impressed with, obviously they're different people, but they've got very similar games. So when we're speaking about Cade, we can somewhat go off of Ty's game and Ty's performances. So Ty competed at lightweight Gi Worlds, not the last time, but the time before that. Looked really impressive. It was cool to see him against very gi heavy opponents like Levi Jones-Leary and Jonathan Alves, who've got very kind of gi orientated games, and he was managing to come through those matches and winning. And I think his wrestling ability really shined through on that, as well as his just relentless passing, eventually breaking guys like Levi. So it'll be interesting to see if Cade can do the same against Nathan, who's a very gi-orientated player and likes to play a lot of guard in the gi and use a lot of double sleeves and stuff like that. So that'll be interesting to see.
Just before we move on, I'll just go back over that phrase, pop for steroid abuse. I'll say he was offered a drug suspension, which saw him have to take some time out of the sport. I just don't know exactly what it was that he essentially, Mika is the he, failed for. So I just want to clarify.
It was potentially some sort of TRT or steroid, but yeah.
We'll just clarify that off the back of his gold medal winning run at the Gi Worlds, where he came first, Ty came second, Mika's title was taken from him because of some sort of drug test failure.
Yeah.
I think that's safe ground.
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, Cade against Ty was at brown belt, and now we've got Cade at black belt. We referenced a match on a couple of podcasts ago, Cade against Tommy Langacker, and it wasn't on a easy to watch platform. I think it was on a match where you've got all sorts of martial arts and combat sports taking place. So didn't actually watch the match at the time, but like you said, subsequently these things get uploaded to YouTube. Have you seen the match since it's going up on YouTube?
No.
I watched the match. Super impressive from Cade. Just like constant threat of attack the whole time. Much more decisive than the first time he played Tommy. And his ability to transition between different areas of the body and retain an attacking threat, seeing crucifixes in the no-gi, things like that. It's just like, it was so fluid. It was so amazing.
I wasn't aware that was uploaded only to...
Yeah, so anyone who's not seen it, have a look. It's on YouTube. It was on One, I think. Definitely worth seeing. He looked super impressive. I would say if he's anywhere near that kind of form, I would favour him in this match. And great to see him back in the gi again.
Yeah, like we've spoken about in some of the recent ones, we've spoken a lot about the gi guys jumping out no gi. Obviously, Cade has trained in the gi his whole life, so it's not strictly true to say that he's just a no-gi guy, but it's definitely his focus these days. I don't know how much he's training in the gi, but yeah, it's always cool to see the opposite of the no-gi guys jumping into the gi, giving that a go as well.
Okay, 2 more super fights, Calum. What else do we have coming up?
Yeah, so we've also got Andy Murasaki versus Mateus Luna. Always like seeing Andy compete, like we've spoken about before. Definitely right up there. It's just he's got some very dominant champions in this division. That's why he's not been able to break through something like the Gi Worlds. But yeah, aside from that, he's definitely one of the top guys. I think he's a heavy favourite in this match. Yeah, just very good passing, very good guard. I'm sure he's going to be able to get on top, get to his passing positions and dominate, I think. Yeah,
we mentioned Andy before on the podcast and said that we love seeing his top game for someone who's in the lighter weight classes. So if we get to see that again, I will no doubt very much enjoy watching it. I'd favour him to be on top and be able to pass and pick up the win. And talking of someone who will most likely get to top, get a pass and pick up the win, who else do we have?
Yeah, so we've also got Tynan Dalpra versus Mauricio Oliveira. So, again, always great to see Tynan compete. Don't know how competitive this match is going to be. Nothing against Mauricio, but it's just in general, there's very few guys in the world that can give Tynan a competitive match. But nonetheless, always good to see a display of Tynan's jiu-jitsu. Maybe he'll be working on some new stuff that we'll get to see. If not, just his classic games, pretty good to watch anyway.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Even if you're not into like who's going to win the match, you're not particularly bothered. Watching Tynan at work is always a pleasure to see what jiu-jitsu he's been working on, and seeing him make it work against another, really competitive black belt.
Yeah.
So definitely think that it's worth having a look at the match or any clips that come out of it to see Tynan Dalpra whenever he's in action. So that's the IBJJF Grand Prix on the Thursday. Right off the back of that, we've got the first South American ADCC trials in Belo Horizonte. We've got these trials on the 2nd, and then on the 9th in Sao Paulo, we have the second trials. So it's always interesting in South America that the trials come so close together. I think we've identified in the divisions that there's one standout division in the first trials, under 88 male, but there are interesting competitors in the other divisions. So we'll do a bit of a deeper dive into the under 88, just because I think there's more interest there, and then we'll touch on the other divisions. So let's start 88, Calum. Who do you have your eye on?
Yes, I think there's some good guys in the division, but I think the clear favourite is Pedro Mourinho. So Pedro, he's not had the best success in ADCC. He's got into ADCC a couple times, but performances in ADCC haven't quite lived up to some of his other performances. So in IBJJF, double gold in No-Gi Worlds in the black belt division. On who's number one, beat Giancarlo Bodoni, who won his division. He's beat Craig Jones on who's number one. So he's won some really high level matches. He's just not quite lived up to that at ADCC, which is odd because it's quite a good rule set for his game. He's very good wrestling and very good subs off of people shooting in on him with his guillotines and stuff. So I definitely think he's the clear favourite in that division. Yeah.
I'd like to double check how he has lost in the ADCC, but I tend to think that his style means that he can get dragged into very close matches.
Yeah.
And he's maybe losing decisions.
Yeah, I think, the last ADCC, I think he narrowly beat J-Rod. I think it was 3-2. I think he lost his second match. Can't remember who that was against. And then he lost a tie first round in the Absolute as well. Close matches, but yeah.
Yeah, I tend to think I see him in close matches a lot of the time, but he's not necessarily blowing people out the water. But then on the other side, he's not getting...
Yeah, and ADCC matches can be so grueling as well. Quite long time frames for the matches. So yeah, if you're that kind of guy that's happened to win those kind of grinded out matches, maybe you can win one or two. But if you go against a guy on the other side of the bracket that's getting quick wins, he's going to have a big advantage as far as energy.
Yeah, and I think that's especially the case at the finals when you're against the elite. Yeah. But in a trials set, I think having a game like Pedro, I equate to like a Santeri Lilius in Europe, who won the first trials here, able to just wrestle his way, standing and on the ground, but like, I know it's saying grind because it almost sounds disparaging, but I mean it positive.
Yeah.
Grind his way through the division. Which was interesting in Europe, just a note on that. Like you had Santeri's like wrestle heavy style to get through the 88, and then on the other side you had Taylor Pierman just submit his way through the division 6-for-6, and I think we saw that previously. Like Ono Flanagan managed to like score a lot of submissions on his way through. So 88 seems to be a division where like you can have this massive disparity between like someone can wrestle their way through the division or someone can sort of submit their way through the division. Pedro Mourinho, I think, is going to wrestle his way through the division.
Yeah, I think he could easily win ADCC Worlds just off of the caliber of people he's beaten, like we mentioned, Craig Jones, Giancarlo Bodoni, double gold at black belt No-Gi Worlds. So yeah, hopefully he manages to put it together at Worlds. But I think there's some other good names in the division like we're going to mention, but definitely favourite to win, I would say.
Go for it. Who else do we have?
Yeah, so as well in that division, we have Gabriel Arges. So Gabriel's made it to ADCC in the past as well. obviously very accomplished grappler in the gi. Won black belt gi worlds a couple times. Not seen too much of him on the no-gi scene lately, but cool to see him jumping back in there. He'll be one to watch.
And who else?
Yes, as well, we've got Matheus Lutz from Marcelo Garcia. Again, a guy that, when he was competing at brown belt, actually, seen him on the no-gi scene, like the super fight scene, like a lot back in 2018-19. Seen him competing like most weekends at these kind of super fight events. Not seen as much of him lately. Kind of fell off the radar a little bit. I've seen him obviously doing some of the smaller competitions, but he's not really been in the forefront of the big competition scene. So yeah, he's really good. Be good to see him competing as well. Some smaller names as well. Achilles Rocha, obviously son of Wagner Rocha. He's had some good performances on some shows lately. Very young as well. So these kind of guys, even if they haven't been at that level yet, it's only a matter of time before kind of a switch flicks and then they're at that level. So he potentially could give some impressive performances in this division as well.
But we favour Pedro to come through. Now, just a note, we're not going to touch on the women's divisions on this podcast because I believe that it's only the second trials that acts as an official qualifier to the final.
Yeah.
So that's how it happened in Europe. So the second trials are on March the 9th. We'll be back with a preview show of that, and then we'll get into the women's divisions there. The heavier men's divisions, we think there's a standout in under 99 and over 99 who are likely to win that division. So we'll flag them just now, and then we'll get back into the lighter divisions, which have some more names of interest who could come through and win. So, Calum, under 99, who have we penciled in?
Yes, we've got Helton Jr. from Checkmat, very established veteran competitor. So he was the one name that jumped out to me in that division. Bunch of guys that I'm not really too sure about, so there could be guys that jump out. That's the great thing about trials as well. There's always people coming through that you've not really heard of that put on a good performance, and then you kind of know them from there on out. But yeah, that's the one name that sticks out to me in that division. And then for over 99, it is the same thing. We've got Victor Honorio from GF Team. Again, same situation, very seasoned competitor, good all-round game, very physical. Again, a bunch of guys in that division that I'm not too familiar with, but I'm sure we'll see some guys coming through.
As we make the transition towards the lighter weight classes, this is a good time to flag a discussion that we were having earlier. And it's about the change in face of the South American trials. And like you're saying, there's a couple of divisions there where there's a couple of names that stand out, and we're not super sure of the guys who are also in the bracket. So we'll be on the lookout to see who stands out. But I think the South American trials are in an interesting place right now, and so do you. So do you want to just run over what we were talking about?
Yeah, so the trials before last Worlds were like really stacked for 66 and 77. Saw guys at 66 like Diego Pato and Baby Shark, and then we saw guys at 77 like Majid Hage, Roberto Jimenez, Mika Galvao, and those guys obviously qualified or were invited that year and then did really well at the Worlds and will then be invited afterwards. So seems like the bit of a like generational shift, especially in the lighter weight classes like 66. They won before last Worlds. We saw Tanquinho win that. He's retired. And before that, we saw Cabrinha. He's also retired. So there was a bit of a generational shift. And I think all those up-and-coming young Brazilian grapplers that we are very familiar with qualified at the last one and then did really well at Worlds and will then be invited and not need to qualify. So there's maybe why we're seeing a bit more unfamiliar names. But again, probably see some guys coming through at Worlds that will again do very well, and we'll see some people that we'll get more familiar with.
Yeah, I think that's why this trials is interesting. Like you said, the last run of the trials in South America, we already kind of knew of Mika and Baby Shark and these guys, and it was like, okay, let's see them in action. And the beauty of the trials is you get to see a lot of them. And
Fabricio as well, another one.
Yeah, so they came through, looked amazing, and firmly established themselves at the world level thereafter. So we're kind of back at that point, you know, looking through the list. There's some names that jump out, but some of the names that are jumping out are slightly, even although they're competing a lot, we'll call them sort of like inexperienced,
less established
at the elite level. So do you want to start on 66 and tell us who to look out for?
Yeah, so one of the names that jumped out to me is Caio Gabriel from Melky Gavel's gym. So he kind of jumped onto my radar at the AIGA events. I think he took the under 70 kilo division, or it might have been under 65. One of those divisions. As well, he's done really well on the IBJJF scene. He's done really well at Brazilian Nationals, no-gi competitions like that, brown and black belt. He had a very good leg lock game, but a good overall positional game as well, so he's definitely one to watch out for. Another guy that jumped onto my radar from AIGA was Felipe Machado. I think he took the under 60 division for the Modelo team, and he looked really good overall as well. Very good overall game. Great wrestling, great submissions, but I think one thing for him, because he was doing the under 60 kilo division and he's competing at the 66 kilo division, and the last guy I mentioned, Caio, he was doing the 70 division, so obviously there'll be potentially a bit of a weight issue for him. I'm sure he probably walks around at 66 kilos and cut, but again, there'll be guys cutting down quite significantly to 66, so yeah, he's definitely one to watch out for. We'll see if the physicality is an issue for him or not. And then one that just recently registered that you brought to my attention.
Yeah, Kennedy Maciel, who we managed to overlook at the Euros.
Yeah.
And then he did really well, won his division.
Yeah.
So we can't overlook him again. I'm going to be a bit boring, and I've written his name down as my favourite for the under 66. I think rightly so, based on like what we've seen of him competitively recently. But Calum's gone for some more exotic names, shall we say, and had his eyes on particularly AIGA. Interesting to see outside of ADCC events such as AIGA given wide exposure to more grapplers. I think I don't want to go too deep into it right now. We're going to come back and preview it, but if you look at the trials that are coming up in Turkey and the European team that's going into that, you've got some, shall we say, sort of more well-known names, some bigger names, and then some names that we know but are not necessarily known to the wider jiu-jitsu watching public.
Yeah.
And I think like those events are great to find out who's coming through and who to keep tabs on, especially going into like an ADCC trials. So yeah. Is there anyone else at 66 you want to touch on?
No, but just going on Kennedy for a little bit. I think interesting that he wasn't invited, because last Worlds he got put out first round by Diego Pato. But the Worlds before that, he made it to the finals and got silver. So I don't know what exactly, because obviously if you get to the final four, especially medal at the previous ADCC, you're pretty much guaranteed an invite if you want it. And then obviously he managed to get to the final, the one previously to that. So I don't know if, you medal one year and then don't do so well the next year, your invite's revoked, or potentially he wasn't sure if he was going to get an invite and then decided, okay, I'll just do trials anyway. I don't exactly know what the situation with that is, but obviously getting silver at Worlds, I think he is definitely a clear favourite in this division, even though there's some emerging guys coming through that could disrupt the division a little bit.
And like you suggested, we don't know if Kennedy has been signed up for that long, because like he wasn't necessarily on your radar having looked through the bracket, and then I looked through the bracket and said, "Oh, Kennedy's competing." So, if he's there, he would be favoured to go deep in the division, and it'll be interesting to see like if he does make it to the final, who he ends up against. Is going to be one of these emerging talents that we've seen come through the AIGA teams. Last division for us today, under 77. Calum, who have you got as a favourite?
There's a couple guys that stood out to me. So one of them was Rene Souza from 10th Planet. We've seen him have quite an interesting game. He goes for a lot of buggy chokes, some things you would potentially class as like low percentage, but he does hit them on high level people. But he has spent a lot of time recently at JT Torres' gym, Essential, and we've seen him a lot working on his wrestling and his passing game. So I would say kind of the previous game we would have definitely can take out some top guys, but a competition like ADCC, I think you definitely need a more well-rounded game. So we've seen him working on that, so it'll be interesting to see how that kind of comes out in the trials. And then the other guy that stood out to me, can definitely pronounce his first name, Fabio. His second name, I'm not too sure. Fabia Christian, maybe. Interesting spelling for it anyway, but he He's had a really good year last year at brown belt, so he got double gold at Nogi Europeans, he got gold at Nogi Pan Ams, and he got gold at Nogi Worlds, and then more recently at black belt he got bronze at the Gi Europeans as well. So obviously that's really impressive resume the past year, so be interesting to see him in that division as well.
And I'm sure as you watch the trials and hear his name called out through his matches, you will better learn the pronunciation. But I think you made a good go at it.
Yeah.
Okay, so 77, Rennie, Fabure, anyone else?
No, there was two main guys that stuck out to me. Again, there might have been guys that have signed up more recently, but those are the two guys that stuck out to me when I had a look through.
That's going to be the part of the joy of watching it this weekend, is seeing who comes through and getting more names on our radar in the South American region haven't seen. The emergence of the new sort of like group of young bloods that are ready to take over from the likes of Tanquinho and Cabrinha and Claudio Calçans and all these guys that had such success at previous ADCCs. So, to reiterate, the IBJJF GP is on Thursday. The ADCC first South American trials are on Saturday. We're going to come back after the IBJJF Grand Prix, hopefully on Friday, maybe Saturday, with a review of what happened there, and it'll give us a chance to get into some of the other events that are happening this weekend. In particular, I think you should check out the card for ADCC, which is an event that's happening in Brazil, and there is some serious firepower on that, so it's definitely going to be worth tracking. And then after the ADCC trials, I keep forgetting Fight Pass.
Yeah, it's a big one as well.
Which has got some ridiculously big names competing on it. So we've got that will also be on our recap show of the IBJJF Grand Prix. We'll have the Fight Pass preview. We've genuinely not forgotten about it, even although I'm doing my best to forget about it. And then, like I said, some of the smaller events coming up on the weekend, we'll get a chance to preview. And then we'll be back probably on Tuesday with a big recap of everything that we've seen, trying to talk about any standout competitors or standout moments that we think you'll get access to that you can watch as well. But for now, the Oracle has spoken. I'm going to try that one again as the sign-off.